Welcome to the AVIXA Diversity event. On behalf of the association, we are delighted to see so many familiar faces, many of our members, and new faces that are not yet members. We're delighted that you have chosen to be here to attend this evening's event. AVIXA is the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association and a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion. My name is Rochelle Richardson. I am the Senior Vice President for AVIXA's InfoComm, which is North America's largest professional audiovisual and integrated experience trade show and conference event. I also oversee AV Executive Experience Conference, it's really AV Executive Conference, TIDE, and experience events for AVIXA. AVIXA believes that the audiovisual technology changes how people and communicate and experience the world. AVIXA is a catalyst in driving the market for AV solutions and technologies and is the community for professionals in our industry. It is the opportunity for professionals to use technology to create integrated experiences. So this evening, you ask, how can you get involved? Well, for those that are members, many of you know how you can get involved, but for those that are not yet members, let me share something with you. You can join and become an AVIXA member. You can get involved in our different councils, committees, education, and our mentor program, and our peer-to-peer programs. As a thank you to you this evening, AVIXA is extending the opportunity for executives in the industry, executive-level participants, to register for AVAC, which is coming up November 5th through the 7th. And we're doing this at a reduced rate of only $899. This is $400 off of our conference price. You can see here on the slide, you have the opportunity to use this code. You can jot it down in your cell phones or take a screen image, but it's DIV 2019. Please come and be a part. We welcome the opportunity to host you in New Orleans November 5th through the 7th. My colleague, Sheila Bowman, over here in the rear of the room, hi Sheila, and I are here and happy to speak with you and answer any questions that you may have. And now, I'd like to introduce to you the Oprah, our host of the evening, Miss Charmaine Torula. She is the Global Managed Services Manager at Varrix with more than 18 years experience, managerial and professional services experience in IT and AV. Charmaine is also the chairperson for the AVIXA Diversity Council, which has over 150 members worldwide, and she oversees the initiatives to increase the diversity workers in AV and executive programs towards their development and accreditation. Please join me in giving a warm welcome this evening to Ms. Charmaine Torula. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone and welcome to AVIXA's first diversity event gala. Yes. I like the participation in this room. It's a beautiful mosaic, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I like it. And this is exactly what our Diversity Council is shooting for. So I want to begin by telling you how we got started. So one day, Alexis LeBroy, Alexis, I know you're here in the back, raise your hand. Alexis LeBroy came to me and she said, Charmaine, are you interested in volunteering? And I said, for AVIXA? I said, sure, why not? I said, okay, I can come to InfoComm, help with guiding people to the tours, the booths. She says, I'll get back to you. A few weeks later, she says, okay, so we're starting a diversity council for AVIXA, and we think you'd be a good person to chair it. I was like, oh my. I just thought I was going to hand out flyers and help a little bit. So I said, sure. So I met with everyone at AVIXA, and they screened me diligently, asked me what I was interested in doing in the AV industry where diversity was concerned. And I said, it's simple. I want the next person like me that comes into this industry to feel comfortable. And I want them to be as excited about AV as I was when I started in AV 10 years ago. So originally I came from the IT world that's now converging with AV. And when I came to AV, it was during the time of the financial crisis when a lot of clients weren't traveling anymore. They needed to collaborate and communicate from their office space. And they said, Charmaine, can you help us do that? And I said, do what? Do integration. What's that? I could sell you the video box, no problem. No, we need to integrate it into our conference room. So I said, I'll find a partner who can help you do that. And I found several. And then eventually one of those partners said, why don't you come on board and work for me? Okay. And I haven't left since, and that was in 2010. So since then, when I first came into the AV industry, I noticed I was the only one of my kind. I stood out. I'm Jamaican, I'm Cuban, Black, woman, right? Single mama. Every diversity checkbox you can think of. So I was really daunted when I came into the industry because I couldn't associate or assimilate with anyone. What's your favorite team, Charmaine? Me? I don't follow sports. What do you do? What are you interested in? I don't like baseball. Not interested in football, hockey, none of that. Soccer, maybe, but don't really follow sports. What do you like to do? I like to do martial arts. I like to ride a motorcycle every now and again. I like to eat food. Took time, right, to find some commonalities, and eventually I did. And when I found the commonalities, soon I found that the AV industry was a world of people who had unique interests, unlike the IT world. They weren't so buttoned up. They had tats, they had piercings, they listened to radical music, they did interesting things like martial arts like me. And after a while, I fell in love. And I've been here ever since. So yay to AV, everybody. So now let's fast forward into today. I'm chairing this council, and everyone asked me, now you know how we got here. We started in June 2018. And everyone said, this is great, this is wonderful. So let me tell you some of the challenges that we've had for the last year and a half since 2018. When we came out, not everyone was receptive to the Diversity Council. Why do you need that? If you have enough talent, you should be able to get a career. That just means you don't have enough talent. It's not about diversity. Oh, well, yeah, sure, that's nice and everything, but I don't think we need that. Okay, what are you complaining about? There's been a lot of resistance and adversity to the Diversity Council within the last year and a half. We've had people that just didn't want to help us at all, to shut the door on us. People who gave us negative comments about us not being talented enough. Us, what's us? So then we started pushing a little harder. And as we pushed a little more, we found there were people that were interested to help us open the door. So let me tell you what the council represents. The AV Diversity Council represents not only women, but we represent African Americans, Latin American, Asian American, Jewish American, Muslim American, LGBTQ, physical disabilities, neurodisabilities, that's a new word for you, transgender community. This is the diversity that exists in the AV industry. This is what comprises our AV Diversity Council. We want to work towards recognizing these diverse AV workers in the AV community, opening up the door even further, and giving them a path of success and longevity in the AV industry for their career. That's our goal. So how are we doing that? I'll tell you now in a minute when when the slide, there we go. So some of the ways we're doing that, we are having events worldwide. We are having events in London, in the UK. We've had several where we're growing the council. We've had trainings at AV integrator facilities like Varrix, like VCA, like Atlantis Partners to train students, diverse students in the AV industry, to teach them how to do the work so that when they graduate, they actually have a good functioning position that pays well, that develops their career path. We're having conversations, we're doing community outreach with different organizations like the Loop Lab in Boston, all over the country, to reach out and effectively not only communicate the diversity initiative, but the one thing we learned that needs education is who the AV industry is, right? You all would agree? When you go in the street, when you work with someone else, they said, AV, what's that? Once you start telling people what AV is, they get excited. And they say, I want to learn more about that. So it starts there. And part of the mission of our Diversity Council is doing that education and starting there. And then the other side of our mission is to help educate people of diverse backgrounds and talents, diversity of thought, and bring them into our community. And also to communicate who we are and the importance of how diversity is going to enhance our business and give us longevity. And also to do events where we can network and learn more about each other and our differences. So those are our three main missions. I'm very happy to say since 2018 of June, we've worked with schools and institutions like Lincoln Tech with instructor Columbus J. Jones. Please stand up, CJ. CJ Jones of Lincoln Tech, who is bringing his students in to the Diversity Council, and we're working with them to get them training to work with partners and manufacturers to get them educated. And so that more than 50% of the students that CJ has worked with now have positions in the AV industry. They are working, and they are diverse. So that's an amazing accomplishment. Also, we want to thank a few people. So let me fast forward a little bit before we get into the good stuff. So some special thanks. The reason why our mission has gotten so far, it hasn't just been the 160 members worldwide that we have. That's how many members we have on the council. We have to thank a lot of people. So Atlantis Partners, I know some of you are here. Thank you. Thank you for going to the students, doing workshops, training them on AV and how it should be done. AV Magazine in UK that's talking about the diversity message worldwide. AV Technology that helps to push our message across and communicate what we're doing, what we have been doing for the last 2 years. Tim Albright from AV Nation, who helps us do streaming and podcasts of some of our events. The Women in AV, during Digital Signage Week, the Women in AV wrapped their hands around the Diversity Council, and they had joint events with us, as well as the AVIXA Women's Council, who have done the same. Gina Sansevero, raise your hand, please. Commercial Integrator Magazine, who's done many articles, videos talking about diversity and the importance of diversity in the AV industry. Varrix, my home, my heart, who started doing the AV Tech Tours for the student, which was massively successful. Thank you so much. Tier PM, our partners who have talked and helped us host events to welcome new members. Lincoln Tech, again, CJ Jones, and some Lincoln Tech students that are here. Clap if you're here, Lincoln Tech. Yes, yes. They've helped to participate and work with our council to make this go even further. BIAMP, with the technology that they're donating tonight for this event. BIAMP, thank you so much. VCA, another integrator that helped with the tech tour. Simcoe, Jim Hurst, I know you're here. Yes. Simcoe has been doing a fabulous job of allowing us to have events at their Simcoe showcases every year. And next year, we're going to be a part of each and every one. Thank you so very much. SCN Magazine, Cindy Davis and the SCN people, the future people, please clap, raise your hand if you're here. Please. Without these partners, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be as strong as we are. We wouldn't have as many members as we do. So special thanks to all of you and all the AVIXA Council members who are here. Raise your hands, clap your hands, let everyone know who you are. Yeah. Speaking of which, so we're going to fast forward to some special honorable mentions. There are a few people on the council that I definitely want to say thank you so much. Their hard work and dedication, working their regular 9 to 5, in addition to advancing our initiative and goals. Starting with Kevin McLaughlin with the Royal Society of Medicine in UK. Kevin has been instrumental in hosting 3 events in the last year in the UK to talk about the message abroad. He's allowed us to grow our council in Europe, in APAC, in the Middle East. So we have members all over the world. Thank you, Kevin. I know you're sleeping right now. Cindy Davis, who is going to moderate our panel today, and it's a good one. Not only has Cindy been pitching in, communicating our initiative, she has been writing articles, talking about the message, getting everyone excited about the work that we've been doing and the education we've been, trying to see forth with the council. So thank you. Rick Hoare, there you are. Rick Hoare with Fashion Institute of Technology. He's the executive director of technology here. He's responsible for all the AV. He knows it well. He and also Fashion Institute of Technology, we would like to thank. They have been helping us, supporting us in the mission of diversity. They also have a diversity council that has been working with the AVIXA Diversity Council. And we wouldn't be here tonight in this beautiful venue space without them and you. Thank you, Rick. And the IT team for Fashion Institute of Technology. CJ Jones, how many times am I going to call your name out? CJ. CJ Jones is a fabulous instructor from Lincoln Tech. He used to work with me at Varrix. He's been in the AV game for a very long time. And he remodeled the AV curriculum to make it possible for the students to really learn the appropriate way to do AV and to be highly functional in the new positions that they do have now. So CJ, thank you for all that you do. Frank Collada with Simcoe, I know he isn't here. Jim, thank Frank for me. Frank is the chair of the Independent Reps Council for AVIXA. He's another council that's been working with our council jointly to help with our mission and our cause. Alexis LeBroy. You guys need to get to know Alexis. She is part of the Women's Council. She's part of AVIXA, decision making. She is phenomenal. She's been supporting me, helping the council, driving our events, helping us get events all across the country, and making our message really come through bright and shining like a star. Giovanni Agramonte from Atlantis Technology Partners. Where are you, Gio? Right there. Gio has been speaking at a lot of events, a lot of workshops. He's speaking with students. He's been working with them, and every time Gio speaks, the students just don't want to leave him. I call him my Paul, the disciple. That's what it is. They start talking, and CJ's attesting to that. He starts talking to them about AV, his passion, his drive for doing it right, being the director of operations of Atlantis Technology Partners. Thank you so much. Gina Sansibero, last but certainly not least. I thank you, Gina, for being one of my Wonder Women. in helping me work with my council and helping us to do joint events with the Women's AVIXA Diversity Council, Brandy Alvarado as well. Without them, there would be really no council. We wouldn't really have all this achievement under our belt. So thank you to everyone that I just mentioned. Everyone, a round of applause. So now to the good stuff. We have an interesting night for everyone today. The next thing that's going to occur, oh no, that's too early, is our nice fireside chat. We have a beautiful panel of speakers from different parts of the AV industry. We have a consultant that is going to be on our panel. We have an AV technician with an asset management company. We have a chief diversity officer. We also have an IT director with a bank. And myself, I'll be at the corner being Egg McMahon. But the person that's going to moderate this discussion is going to be Cindy Davis. So everyone, stay tuned. In a few minutes, we're going to be back out. We're going to have this discussion. We're going to talk to these industry leaders as to how they are improving diversity and inclusion in their own organizations. And then you get to ask them some questions. So with that said, I thank you all for being here. It's beautiful to see you, and I hope to see you even more with every event with the next year, year after year. Thank you very much.
And while we're waiting for the panel to come up, I think I've probably gotten to almost everyone individually, but we're going to be using a really cool technology tonight from BIAMP called CrowdMics. So I think you've probably already downloaded the app. If you haven't, please do. And I'll give you a little demo of how this is going to work. Brandon?
Hi, everybody. My name is Brandon Roberts with BIAMP Systems. I'm over here. Just wanted to thank you and Charmaine and everybody here for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this amazing event. What I'm using right now, obviously, is my phone to talk through the sound system, which is pretty cool, right? So it's a company that we acquired about a year ago. It gives everybody the opportunity to speak and participate in polling and to talk back, to ask questions, and to get them answered back by a panel. So if you, Cindy, thank you for spreading the word, but the process is to download the app. It's called CrowdMics, and you would connect to the CrowdMics Wi-Fi connection, and then you would join the event. It should be pretty obvious. There's only one event called AVIXA Diversity event. And then from there, you can either request to talk or text in a question. If you request to talk, that'll go to Cindy, and she can approve you or not. Or if you are very long-winded, she can cut you off. And then, in addition to all that, she will be doing a couple of polls where you can, she'll put them up on the screen, and then you can actually answer some of the question, and it will show live voting on that. So pretty cool. Download the app, CrowdMic, connect to the Wi-Fi, CrowdMic's Wi-Fi, join the event, and you should be good to go. And then you can either text in a message or you can ask to speak, and then we'll do some polling later on. Everybody got it? Cool. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Brandon. I actually got a chance to use CrowdMics for the very first time at the AVIT Summit a couple months ago, and it was a lot of fun. So, doing it again. So we've got a really amazing panel here tonight, and thank you for everyone for joining us, and thank you guys for joining us. It really takes a lot of different types of companies and people, individuals to create a diverse environment, whether it's a workplace or an organization. So I'd like to introduce from my left, Adrienne Bucella. She's partner of TAD Associates. Sebastian Marciano is multimedia technician at Oppenheimer Funds. Dr. Ronald Milan, Chief Diversity Officer of Fashion Institute of Technology. And again, thank you so much for having us here. Ronald Wilkerson is the Corporate Real Estate Analyst for Federal Home Loan Bank of New York. So I'm going to go back, and you've all, of course, met Charmaine already. So I'm going to go back and ask each of you, how diverse is your company, and really how you started and what you're working towards. And then after they answer, and we'll be brief with that, I'm going to go to our first poll question and ask you how diverse your companies are. So Adrienne, if you'd start, that'd be great.
Sure, thank you for having me here. So TAD Associates is a consultancy, AV, media, design, technology in New York City. We started about 10 years ago with our two founding partners, John Reeves and Guy LaFontaine. And when we started, we were 50% diverse of those two people. And today we are actually keeping up with that pace, which I think is incredible in our industry. We're not a very big company. We have about 40 people right now. And in terms of racial diversity, we're probably around 40%. Similar with our male to female ratio. And if you start looking at other categories, you know, it balances, and it probably equates out to what you see in a normal New York City environment.
Great. Thanks, Sebastian.
Thanks for having us. I've recently transitioned to Invesco. We got acquired. We were Oppenheimer. And there's a small to mid-cap company up to about 3,000 spread out. Invesco, by comparison, is a global company of 10,000 plus, and would only release to me recently the official numbers for gender diversification. And so they had a mandate for themselves to reach 30 to 40% women in the executive space by 2020. And thankfully enough, they're reaching, at the end of Q3 2019, we're at 31% in North America of women executive space and 34% globally. So those are the numbers I have for gender diversity at Invesco.
Thank you for having me on this panel. We're a little bit different here at the Fashion Institute. Coming here 3 years ago, I've been here actually 6 years now, but I assumed this role as Chief Diversity Officer 3 years ago with the idea of diversifying student enrollment and also faculty and staff. And we put together a strategic plan to do that. We have more female students than male students. We want to change that a little bit. Basically 3/4 female to a quarter male. We put together a plan where we are diversifying faculty members. And the diversity piece represents, we want our faculty and our student enrollment to look like that of New York City. And so we have a 3-year plan to do that. We're making great strides with the student enrollment. We're still working on ways of how to bring more diverse faculty members, but that also is one of the difficult things, as you may know. If you're very good at fashion or art, you can make a lot of money, and you can make more money than being a teacher. And that's the reality that we have to deal with. But we're trying to do different ways, come up with different ways to give them incentives to come and to give back. So we're hoping to change that as well.
Well, just as everyone else has said, thanks very much for inviting us. Pleasure to speak with you. So while we are known as the Federal Home Loan Bank, we are not a federal agency, although we are also federally regulated. But a bit about figures and numbers. So on my cheat sheet, every year the bank issues a diversity and inclusion report. So here's the 2018 report on inclusion. So of our total of 480 employees, 70% of those employees come from diversified backgrounds. Breaking it down a bit more, we have 44% of those being women, and 56% of those being men. And the other side of this, which is really what I want to highlight, is that when it comes down to inclusion and reaching out to those who are somehow or another falling between the cracks, here are the numbers here. So for the last year, 2018, we entered into businesses or engaged vendors, which were 54 women or minority-owned businesses. 97 of those were not only women-owned businesses, but also handicapped joints or efforts. And 3% of those were disabled-owned businesses. The bank is keeping track of these. It's a personal charter mention type of thing, a statement, mission statement. I thought it's interesting that the bank is measuring itself and also being audited yearly to see whether or not they are meeting their own defined goals. So far, so good. In the last 4 or 5 years, they've committed to keeping those numbers in the upward movement, and I think they're doing quite well.
Great. Charmaine? I know I didn't, I pulled Charmaine in at the last minute because, you know what, she's just so wonderful. So.
Well, in terms of diversity at Varrix, we have over about 30% of our workers are diverse, which is very rare in the AV industry. In the last year, we've actually grown that, so we're incrementally increasing diversity within our engineering team. We have one of our engineers here tonight who's actually the photographer for this event, Akin Tayo Adewale. I know, I like pointing it out. It's one of the engineers. So we're increasing diversity in not only just the company overall, but within the technical and the engineering staff, which is important. So getting diversity in tech is a very important push and initiative, and I'm happy that, again, my house and my home is, Varrix is supporting that, so.
Great, thank you. So, diversity, I mean, we've got a very diverse panel here, as in addition to their companies are diverse. So I want to ask you, first poll question, how diverse is your company? And if we could get that up onto the screen. Here we go. So, take a couple minutes. If you could, on your phone, you'll see the options. Less than 5%, less than 25%, 50%. We are diverse already. All right, well, looking pretty good. Whoa, less than 50%. I'm watching it live. Oh, so are you. All right, so everybody got a chance to answer? All righty, I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1, end that. So I would have to say it's a little bit better than I expected. We've all been probably in many different companies throughout our careers, and in publishing, I have to say it's not particularly diverse. And I know we're specifically talking about AV, but I think our companies, even though your division might be AV, our companies probably are not AV specific, not everyone though. But wow, look at that, 14% have a already diverse company workforce, so congratulations to you guys. And really only 4% have less than 5% diversity, and I can tell you when I started my career, that was certainly the norm. So kudos to you guys. Alrighty. All right, so I'd like to go back and ask, I know that you started with 2 people, so that's easy to start diverse. But if you could kind of talk about how you really developed diversity within your organizations and really some of the challenges, as well as, how do you recruit a diverse workforce? And actually, I mean, I think Go right ahead.
I
Ron.
think the one thing you have already by having a diversity council is critical. And also having a strategic plan is the second point of it. You have to have buy-in. Everyone has to understand the importance of having diverse and being inclusive, and that's important for the bottom line. That's the same for education as well, because students will feel more comfortable if they're coming to a more inclusive environment. But you have to have buy-in from the top down. And we're very fortunate here at FIT that our president established a diversity council almost 12 years ago and created the CDO, the Chief Diversity Officer position 3 years ago, with the idea that in 3 years, I want to see more diverse student population, more faculty population, and senior staff. And we're making great strides there, because if you look at our senior staff, it is very representative of that of New York City. And that's very positive. The other thing that we're doing too, in terms of going to schools, and I know you talked about Lincoln Tech, that's where you start. You go to the schools and you mentor the students, and you work with the students, and you make sure that they understand there are opportunities there, and you give them the resources to be successful. So I think what we're doing now is we're fishing, but we're using a different net, because if you use the same net, you're going to get the same results. And we're doing things differently in terms of how we're recruiting, and I think that's what's helping us a great deal. And it requires everyone to think out of the box and everyone to understand that what we're doing is we're getting the best and the brightest who may be otherwise overlooked. It's not about abilities, because everyone have the abilities. It's about maybe they didn't feel they could do this, and given the opportunity. So that's what we're doing differently here.
I think, I'm sorry.
And I just wanted to chime in. So I'm glad that you said fishing with a different net. So at this past InfoComm, I had a few integrators say that, well, if they were talented, we would get them. And I said to that person, well, how are you acquiring your talent? Oh, we leave it to our HR manager to do. How are they doing it? Oh, I don't know. Do you have input into that? Exactly. So that's where it starts, right? To fish with a different net. Typically in the AV industry, we basically go for the model of who we have in our company's existence today. So if Dan is doing a great job, we're looking for another Dan. And we're going to try to, our HR managers and our recruiters are going to look in the same pool over and over again. Right. The problem is that's very restrictive.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's restrictive, and it prevents us from getting ahead and going further in the AV industry and further developing the talent pool and bringing that into our company. So we overlook a lot of people. For example, in the telecom industry, there is a lot of diverse workers who already know how to terminate cable. In the cable companies, phone companies, they have a lot of what we need, but in addition, right, they have knowledge that converges with our world.
Absolutely.
So now AVIT convergence, everyone has heard about that, is a big thing. We need some of that in order to bring us the next level in the AV industry. So what you said is spot on, just going to a different pool. And Adrian?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same model as that. I think where we start at TAD is diversity of thought in terms of where we're pulling our resources. So, Cindy and I were talking about this earlier. Now you're starting with your training programs, but most of us didn't start out, from high school thinking that we were going to be in the AV industry. We came to it from one way or another, and at TAD we've kind of bought into that wholeheartedly by going a little bit further afield. Then, AVIT, we actually have most of our staff, about 30%, coming from the architecture world, so with architectural formal education, which I think helps in our business, but also helps to diversify the crowd pool that we would normally get. And then we have also pulled in other types of experience, so product design, content management, content design. So I think the diversity of thought in terms of their education, their experience, and then also the diverse backgrounds of the demographics themselves, we pride ourselves in giving our clients the best user experience. How are you ensuring that you're providing the best user experience if you don't have diverse people to check that experience against? If your experience, your GUIs, your operations personas are only focused on a singular type of person, then you're missing out on that whole plethora of human experience and the way that things are organized.
And I think it's relatively new where a company would actually have positions such as yours where you're actually, that's your job,
Right.
is to ensure diversity.
Well, that's what's happening. It's becoming more and more common in higher education, but it's also becoming more and more common in industry, and that's especially the case in the fashion industry, in the fine arts, in the business industry. What we find, for example, in the fashion industry, Gucci just hired a new CDO. We find that other fashion houses are doing the same thing, Ralph Lauren and others, because they understand the importance of inclusion and diversity, but they also realize that they're missing a whole market that they're not focusing on, and by changing their focus, they can expand their market as well. So you see that happening across the board. In terms of higher education, you see it because the statistics show there are minority students that are not in higher education that would benefit from being in higher education. So the thing about my role is I cut across all the pillars in higher education, enrollment, academics, and so on, to make sure that everyone stays focused on the plan. Mm-hmm. And that's common, that's throughout higher education, and I see it more and more in industry, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So Ron, I understand that at your company, you, not only within your company, you work towards a diverse workforce, but you also ensure that your vendors are diverse. So could you speak to that a bit?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that we start by doing is identifying within the company, what is your understanding or definition of diversity or inclusion? There are a number of ways you can illustrate this. Take a filling. It's an amalgam. It's a combination of a number of things, a number of elements, a number of ingredients to a recipe. But once your dentist puts that amalgam in your tooth, now this is where the rubber hits the road. It's got to last for a long time. It has to endure a number of pressures, right? At the end of the day, if your dentist has done a good job with collecting all the various parts of that amalgam, you'll be a happy person. If that doesn't happen, then you'll be back again to visit the dentist. In the bank situation, we look to define what is our ideal amalgam. People sit down at a project table, bring with them all their experiences, but they're pretty much refined. They're elements. So how do we get this mix to work? And how long will it give us in terms of a duration? What can we build upon? A simpler way to illustrate this, cement. Cement's just essentially a few elements, but who of us would sit or stand or walk into a building where that mix was not ideal? So an understanding of what the ideal mix is, what are the constituents, what are the elements, and then look to balance. One way that the bank does do this is, again, to identify what's your take on diversity. How would you define it? And without a word, look at each candidate or each person and ask, do you see elements or indications of diversity in the persons, just how they deal with each other, how they communicate, for example. Many businesses look at individuals on their employment roster, those who have foreign language skills. They look at those individuals and they realize that person represents a potential new market only because they speak a foreign language. Now, what you do with that tool is up to you as a business owner or operator. If you're thinking in terms of amalgam or diversity, that foreign language speaking individual employee represents a great potential. You want to keep hold of that individual, and if that person is a good person, then they're likely to attract other foreign speaking individuals to your company, your organization. That's one way that indirectly your company can grow and open up or reach new markets.
Great. Sebastian, if you can, I know you're transitioning, and we'll actually in your role, but could you tell me a little bit about the diversity and how your company is working with diversity and how you attract folks within your company?
Well, I'm sure we're all aware of, vast efforts at large and small firms, particularly financial, that have the money and the capacity to roll out formal programs, and now even mandated and sometimes regulated. It's interesting, this number 44% is also where our total population of women stands at. But we see this in the finance professional space, and it's really hard for me in this current company, in the past one, back when I was at Morgan, across the board, to get numbers in terms of ethnicity, LGBTQ numbers, and things like this. And so I think this is a late stage conversation that's just starting to get some traction. But I will go back to that piece about, it sounds a little cheesy, but I got huge impact on a personal level and saw it in the room when I particularly engaged in unconscious bias training, because you don't know what you don't know. And as woke as me and all of my friends are, not that woke. So when we got in the room I highly encourage that whatever type of class you can engage or get your people to engage at work in is worth its weight. And a big piece of that was challenging each other and having some awkward conversations in the room, and also seeing those metrics. And I like to go back to that because when we have those difficult conversations with peers, when I talk to people that look and sound and act like myself, that are from my demographic, let's say, those numbers are important because it speaks truth. And maybe we've seen the numbers from McKinsey, let's say, or a lot of studies that point to big numbers, such as 21% better performance across many studies for gender diverse teams, and 35%, up to 35% better performance, again in finance, but big numbers for ethnically diverse teams. And so when you get some hard stats across a lot of things you can point at, it means a lot, especially if it's new to you, which it was to myself as well. Back to your question, that's where I want to see some more traction, and I can hopefully have some agency, is in the vendor space. Shout out to Atlantis. You've got Ken Fisher retrofitting a room right now, so I'll be arguing with him about punch downs tomorrow, and he's been great.
He's got some time after this, actually. So actually, to your unconscious bias comment, during InfoComm this past June, Charmaine had a unconscious bias session, and there was quite a few people there. And I spoke to one of the attendees. I wasn't able to go, but I spoke to one of the attendees, and I actually asked what the diverse nature of the attendees were. And he said, well, it was all people who looked like him, of color. And I think that was kind of missing the point. And I think one of the things that folks of diverse backgrounds can do is also say, hey, there's this unconscious bias session. You, my manager or HR person or whomever, needs to come and listen, because I think talking, it's great for networking, certainly, to have lots of diverse backgrounds. But I think if we don't get to the folks that really need to change that behavior, change their hiring practices, and become more aware, I think that would be good.
Absolutely. And just to chime in on that. So yes, we had an unconscious bias event at InfoComm. It went very well. And there were a lot of Caucasian Americans that said, I can't join your council, can I? I said, you absolutely can. So one of the things that I want to jump to is what Sebastian mentioned. He said, to be comfortable, he likes to see diversity. One of the biggest drivers in the AVIXA Diversity Council is what group? You guys wouldn't believe it if I told you. Millennials, Caucasian millennials. Why? Because in their generation, they're used to diversity. They grew up with it. It's in their culture, in the music, in the food. it makes them comfortable in their work environment. They're more comfortable when they see diverse people and they get new diversity and exciting things to do and new things and new people to meet. The millennial group, they're part of our council as well. And they have, had open conversations within our council about, well, I thought this. Part of the thing in our council that was very big when we started is, people would say, well, women, council, women, they were learning. We were learning from each other because we're very diverse worldwide. So we have African American, we have Latin, we have Asian, we have Muslim, we have Jewish. And what we've learned in our Diversity Council is the diversity issues are different depending on region, right? In America, we have a different set of diversity issues. Lord knows we have them. In Europe, it's very different. It's based mostly on the Muslim community, religious community, Middle East, their diversity issues. In New Zealand, Australia, LGBTQ, right, is an issue. They don't get a voice as much. So we realized within our council, we learned from each other where the problems exist where it comes to diversity and our issues. And we're learning from each other, Caucasian, everyone alike, what that means. And through that, we're educating ourselves. And with that, we're hoping to educate the AV industry and even go beyond, because right now we're getting a lot more people outside of the AV industry that say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that was a problem. I didn't realize that was an issue, and I want help. So millennials has been a very big, strong contributing factor to driving the diversity message within our council.
So we're actually getting some questions. So feel free to text in your questions, and I think this might be a good time because we're actually running a little bit behind, and we've got a great panel here. So please feel free to either text in your questions or use your crowd mics, and I'll go through them. I have to accept your request. So first, I'm going to start off. Sebastian, the question for you. What exactly is unconscious bias training?
Unconscious bias is things we're doing to reinforce negative norms that we have no idea we're doing, and chipping away at some of the substructures we just built or fallen into that we might want to get rid of. It's a bias by not thinking about it.
Can I add to that? We do that a lot. We call it implicit bias, and we do a lot of that training because a lot of times people don't realize that they're doing something or realize that they're saying something or offending someone. And we do that a lot when we're training staff when they're doing searches, because sometimes they may ask a question that they may feel is a fine question, but it's a biased question, or it's an inappropriate question. So the training is very important, and it also leads to one other thing called radical empathy, because a lot of times people you don't really know someone until you really step into their shoes or their background. So, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that in terms of the training, because it's so vital, and have it all the time and have people participate in it, because you learn so much about yourself and about others.
Indeed, would you agree that it's not sensitivity training in the old school sense?
Oh, definitely
it's
not.
It's more about
learning about yourself and understanding what makes you tick, because we're all socialized different ways. We all have different backgrounds, but it also allows you to open up and to understand someone else by removing your language, your approach toward things, because a lot of times we're used to biases are natural. They come from various things, but sometimes we get so used to it, we don't realize that when we're saying, hi, hun, that's not really, you might be saying because someone at home would say that, or you may feel, well, I'm just being nice, but someone would take offense to that. So that's what so it's not really about sensitivity, it's about really learning about yourself and learning about others.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the hi, hun, hi, baby thing. That's something I know a lot of the women in AV in this room have heard a lot. Hey, sweetheart. Hey, honey. Hey, baby. Can you help me with that? Yeah, it's unconscious because it's based on the culture that that person has grown up in and the environment, and they don't understand that in this day and age, the wage disparity between men and women is huge, and we do the same positions, and you're further diminishing us when you use those terms, especially if we're not related to you or friendly with you in any way. So it's just something that, it's going to take time to, unconscious bias training is going to be essential,
Yes.
Throughout the organization, especially in the AV industry because it's a very old school type of culture. So that's what we're working through. And happily enough, a few people get scared when I call them out on it, but they receive it decently and calmly. And the one important thing I try to tell people when you do call out what makes you uncomfortable, don't make it too negative. Make it an educational point, a point of education.
Yeah, I think something that Sebastian mentioned that is important about the unconscious bias is that there are structures in our environment that reinforce the unconscious biasness. And especially when you are an executive in your company and trying to understand how the needs of your diverse population are different. And it's going to be hard to accommodate them because it's much easier to put everybody on the same religious schedule, put everybody, make sure that evenly divide the bathrooms, Turns out women need more bathrooms than men. It just happens. So, and so it's not only, looking within yourself, but looking within your company to say, what are the structures that are there that reinforce the norm, and how is that affecting people who don't fit into that normal category, and what can we do to make their life a little bit easier?
So good. We've gotten a whole bunch of questions in already. So this is a really good one. My issue about diversity is that I'm usually the only diverse person in the room and realize that my pay isn't the same. Since we are in the same position, how come my pay isn't the same, and how can we leverage this? Anyone want to take that one on? How do you do that? We've all been in that, I think many of us have been in that position. We want to know.
That's a tough question. It's a very good question. And again, it's about being consistent in your practices. And I mean, here at the college, when we post a job, we post it based on we have categories, and it's mapped to such a way where you're not going to have these inequalities like that. And being that we're a public institution, we have to do that. And then that way you don't have the inequality, so to speak, in there. That is common. However, that is common in the fashion industry and in some of the business industries that we deal with. And what we educate our students to do is to negotiate and to really do their homework when they accept a job. You have to do it. No one says you have to take a job, but it's very empowering when you go in and you understand your worth. And that's the key, is understanding your worth. And when you're understanding your worth, then you can negotiate anything. And it's changing. It's not changing as fast as we would like it, but it is changing, because if you look at 30 years ago, how much money a male would make $1, and it was 60 cents for a woman. That's changing, but we need to get that dollar to dollar. And knowing your worth is what is critical. It's going to help with that.
Yeah, and also to add into that, because I can definitely tell you, recently I found out from one of my past employers, and I left. I said, oh yeah, this company wanted to make me a new offer to manage this team, and they were paying me much less than I was aware of it. He says, oh yeah, the base that I would only allow was this. And I said to him, and I'm good friends with my former manager, I said, but you were paying me 15% less of that. And he's like, oops. I said, so you were okay with doing that? He says, listen, as a manager, I felt if I could get away with paying less and save the company a buck, I will. I said, but why do that to me? Because I could get away with it. And that's what it comes down to. You know, when you find yourself, you're in that position, most of the time, you know, they feel, the employers, that, okay, if you're of a certain ethnicity, background, okay, you're not going to ask for much. It's your responsibility to start asking, to start commanding, and start challenging. Now is the time to do it. Everyone says, oh, it's a very caustic environment for diversity. This is the best time to start challenging people, because right now we're in flux where change has to happen and where people are actively making it happen. So you have to be part of it. And it's a step. It's not an easy step half the time. You also have to be prepared to take the leap of faith somewhere else. But I promise you, if you do that, and I did that not that long ago, and I took the leap of faith, and I found that I got what I deserved, and I wasn't getting paid less, and I did do better. And then I commanded a lot more respect from that. So it is a hard position to be in, but if you do find that you're in that position, before you leap and go somewhere else or run to something else, just like Dr. Milan or Ron, I know you like to call Ron, says, do your research. Figure out what you're worth, what your value is. And then when you know you're worth more, don't accept less. You must challenge the environment. You have to do that.
So, go.
I was just going to say, to answer the question about being the only person in the room. So this happens to me all the time, happened to me today. So I think you need to know, like we were saying earlier, you need to know your value. You need to know that there's a reason that you're there, right? And that you have something to add, and that just who you are is not what you're there for. You're there to take command, to take leadership, to contribute your knowledge. So know your stuff, because otherwise people will call you out, and they will call you out no matter who you are. But I think it's just about knowing that you are important and your contribution is important, and it's maybe even more important because you're the only woman in the room or whatever. Yeah.
So this next question, and we've got time for one more, barely, but I will want to start with you. How do we get more women to apply for AV positions? Do you have a suggestion on that?
Don't call it AV. AV has a connotation of a TV cart rolling down the hallway in the 1980s, pushed by some nerdy white kid. So, I mean, it's bad, it's got a branding problem that we need to update a little bit. And and I think today we are so much more than that. We are technologists in an age when technologists are the most important people that we have, right? So everybody wants to be a technologist, and we need to start talking about what we do at that level. We need to say that this is basically a STEM industry, that you need engineering skills, that you need math skills, and it's a welcoming industry for that. It's not something where, like when you come to TAD, or you come to Varrix, or one of the great companies represented up here, it's going to be welcoming, and you're going to find more women.
So maybe multimedia technicians.
I don't know. We have to come up with a better name.
Yes, that should have been a poll question up here, but we'll ask that next time. And I'm going to thank my panel. Thank you so much. Everybody will be here for a bit longer, and Charmaine has a very special guest to introduce.
Yes, a very special guest, so stick by in the next 5 minutes. But I want to thank everyone on the panel. Thank you very much. The reason why this panel was chosen is because in their respective organizations, they have proven to demonstrate and obtain the diversity necessary to make them successful in what they do, to propel their business model, and actually capture more market share. So that's why they are here. Speak to them, know them. I definitely sought each one of them out for that reason, because I know that of them. And that's the important, takeaway. Increasing that market share, increasing your strength, increasing your value. That's the key. So thank you, everyone, for being part of this. Okay, everyone. The finale. So I thank you so much. We're running it a little bit behind. It's been a busy night in New York City. It really has. A lot of traffic. The Rangers are playing up the block. It's a Thursday night. Everyone is having a beautiful night. But we are going to go to the next and final session, and one of the best sessions of tonight. We have a special speaker here tonight. I'm very excited because most of us are familiar with his work. Yes, I am. If I told you I had a 23-year-old daughter, would you believe me? Yes, I am. Your mic is right there. So yes, I did. You didn't, yeah, he said, how did I do that at 33? No. I'm around Oprah's age. Let's just put it that. Coming closer to her age. So no. So yes. So the gentleman I'd like to introduce, and I reversed his first two names a little bit. He is a legend, and he's part of a legendary band that many of you know, Earth, Wind, and Fire. His name is B. David Whitworth.
Thank you so much.
So I want to kind of, talk to him because I was introduced to David through, I'm going to say the name again, Columbus Jones, CJ. CJ said, I have a fabulous friend, and if you're looking, I said, CJ, I need a great speaker that could talk about driving diversity in our industry, especially someone who could talk about the history and what that looks like and how we can come forward. So CJ's like, David would be able to do it. David might be able to do it. Let me see. I said, if you could, I appreciate it, CJ, please.
That's exactly what I said. All that noise you heard, that's just... But then it cleared up.
And then it cleared up. That was divine, I think. That was the divine coming to say something. That was a sign.
Now we can hear clearly now.
Yes, we can hear, and we're paying attention. We're awake, right? So he said, David, and I said, who's David? He says, oh, from Earth, Wind, and Fire. I was like, really? I said, yeah, he's my friend. We grew up together. So David, I just want to turn to you. David is from our area. Where are you from?
I'm from East Orange, New Jersey. Yay!
That's right. There's a lot of people in Jersey who are like, yes, yes. Yes, so tell us a little bit about yourself, David.
I'm a little guy who has trouble sitting in chairs built for large people. We need some more diversity in furniture, because if I sit back, then sometimes the short people we know this position, right? So we sit up to look. See, so we sit up to look mature, but then we have to strengthen our back muscles. So I'm from a little town across the water, East Orange, New Jersey. Grew up in a very musical town. At a young age, didn't realize that there were people like Dionne Warwick that went to the same high school. And I found that out because we had the same choir director. He was still there when I was there. And she actually came back to the high school once when I was a senior, I think. So I come from this small town, very musical town, so musical that at our high school we had the talent shows. Some of you might be familiar with, they have the house band that plays for all the people that audition, and they have one band that plays for all the contestants. We had so much music in our high school that there were at least 2 or 3 bands. We had to audition to be the house band. There were that many musicians, and that's just that one school. I say that because years later, I check back with different friends that are now on the faculty or work in the school system, and they just say it's really sad because technology is good in one sense, because it helps us do a lot of things faster, a lot of things that we used to need to call several people for we can do ourselves. But it stopped people from coming together in that people were just pressing buttons. So instead of them singing to a live band, they were singing to the track. And I don't mean a track without the vocal. I mean singing basically to the record in the talent show. Sad but true. So I'm from this little town, East Orange, New Jersey. I grew up in the school system. I was one of those, speaking of, I had a very diverse education. I spent 6 years in public school and 6 years in private school in intervals of 3. So 1st to 3rd grade was private, then I went to the public school, started playing trumpet in 5th grade, and then 7th grade went to another private school. They didn't really have a strong music program, so I said, let me take another instrument so I can kind of fall back a little bit, because they were more academically driven, which was great, but the music program was really not good at all. So I just said, I'll play clarinet. But the friend of mine that lived down the street from me, she played clarinet. She taught me more in one night than I learned in the whole semester. So that was a musical waste of time. But it introduced me to another instrument, which is good, because then it increased my awareness of other instruments, more diversity. Then my sophomore year, I came back to public school, East Orange High, finished out there, and that was the best. Went on to a small school in Boston, a music school called Berklee College of Music. Met many, many musicians, and that became my sort of foray into the music industry, because many of those people, many of the faculty worked in the industry already, and they'd sort of been tired of traveling or wanted to settle down or wanted to give back. So they came back to teach at this school whose alumni were among people like Quincy Jones, Arif Mardin, who was a very well-known producer, Average White Band, Chaka Khan, those first, I think, 3 or 4 solo records, Arif Mardin produced those records. So at Berklee, I met a lot of these people that went on into the industry, and it became this one melting pot of diversified. And I don't say that, lightly. We had people not only from all walks of life, but all over the world, because you didn't have to take an entrance exam to get into Berklee. You had to take a placement exam. So if one girl decided on a whim, I want to try music. She wanted to go to med school, but she just said, I'll try. And bless her heart, her parents let her. I wish my father would say if I changed my mind, but she actually went for just a semester, because you didn't have to take an exam to get in. Once the check cleared, or your student loan cleared, they said, okay, you're here, now let's take this exam and we'll place you at your level, which is kind of cool, actually.
That is kind of cool, yeah. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up, the educational history, your educational background, because that's one of the issues we working against in our AV industry. And you're kind of familiar with our industry now. I mean, part of our industry, when your band plays around the world, we are in the background helping with the sound and the support. So you have an extensive history with working with those people. Talk to us about, the difference between then and now and how that's improved.
Wow.
I know, that was deep. I'm sorry.
It's so funny, because I don't look at age chronologically. I mean, the old thing is when you get a little older, some things just start hurting out of nowhere, and you don't know why. You didn't bump anything. You're just not 22 anymore. So when you said that about then and now, I have to think about, okay, well, where are we now, and how long ago was then?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know when we spoke previously, we talked about roadies, right? Mm-hmm. So the history with AV, a lot of us know, it was started out by people who were on the road, right? Roadies, who assisted bands, did the sound, the music, and then a lot of those technicians came and developed the AV industry, developed their own business, and started growing it from there. So I know we were talking about roadies weren't so diverse at a certain point.
Right, and that's what I was thinking about that. When you said that the young woman that sat first after the moderator.
Adrian.
When she mentioned that maybe we should call it a different name instead of AV, because AV kind of, you get that picture of
the cart.
the cart, and she didn't use the word geeky, but since I'm call myself a cool geek, I can use the geek word. But a geeky white kid. and that struck me because I remember years ago, there would be an African American act or, singer or band or something, and then the crew would be mostly white. And when she said that point, that's what made me think about that. And I really thank all the crew whenever we work, because a lot of times there's this fine line, this wall, like, they don't talk to us because they feel like that, we're this type of way and we wouldn't associate with them. And I always make it my business to tell them, even the local crews, we have a crew that travel with us, but we also, every city, we have a local crew that come and help our crew with the loading in and the breaking down all the equipment. And I always thank them. They watch us as we walk past, and you can tell they want to say hello, but they don't. So I always make it my business to break that wall and say thank you, because without you, they wouldn't hear or see us. We would just, it'd be like us sitting over there where CJ is sitting now. Now, how great would the show would be if that's all you saw? Or how great would our voices sound if the mic, it doesn't sound the same. So years ago, you didn't have as much diversity. Now it's great, because not only do I see, of course, people of color, but I see many women now. It's so great. One of our lighting directors years ago was a woman. We had a great relationship on the road, and my wife, she always would like to watch her go and climb up the lighting truss. You put the harness on, and my wife said, I want to do that, because my wife is that way also. And so I love to see the women out there, even the local crew, you look and see under the hard hat, and you say, oh, that's a woman. Oh, good. So that's great to see. So yes, it's kind of like what America is slowly but surely coming into, is that, oh, wow, somebody else can do that. Somebody short can do that. We don't need somebody tall. Somebody round can do that. We don't need somebody skinny. Like, yeah, you look good in the clothes too. You can be in our magazine. Because I think about AV also, historically, before there was electricity, technology, there was still AV. Now, think about it. News still had to be spread either audibly or a printing press. It still had to be heard in some kind of way. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how things visually came across in this country. So if something didn't look the way certain people in control thought it should, it was unacceptable. So that came to me tonight, that AV's been going on for a long time. Before there was technology, we were concerned about how things were heard, how things would come across, and how things visually were perceived. And so it's so nice to have this discussion today to realize that, no, we don't all have to look alike, because we don't. But how great could America have been had we practiced diversity from the beginning? Had we realized that, oh, she can too. Don't ignore her just because she's a she and not a he. She might have the idea. She may not be able to physically do it, but she may have the idea. So now we take her idea with his strength, and now we have something that's better.
Right.
But sadly, before, it was just, well, not even before, sometimes now, it's just, okay, everybody, you, and now, not them, just you, and you, because you look and sound like what we need you to sound like. And the cure for cancer could be over there.
Yeah.
And nobody ever let that person in the door.
Exactly. And what you said, what we're trying to push in our industry, yes, there's not one stop shop, right? One person that can do it all. That's the key with diversity, right? And you just said it. It's taking this person's idea, this person's strength, this person's attribute, a culmination that makes this mighty force that can make it all happen.
Look at our bodies. Now, there was an old little joke I heard back in the 90s. It was kind of funny. The different parts of the body were discussing about who should be in control, who was the best. And so, of course, the brain put in its bid, because I think of everything and make all the decisions. But then, the hands put in their bid, because the implementation, the signal gets sent, but we still do this work. Well, the feet said, yeah, but we can't get there unless we take you. But, so then, pardon me, I know we just met, but a certain part of the body where waste is eliminated from put in its bid. And of course, everybody just kind of laughed, like, are you kidding me? All you do is funnel waste. And so that part of the body closed up. What do you think happened to the rest? The eyes got watery, the brain gets foggy, and then they realize, oh, that's important also, right? Everything is important, so don't exclude something, don't discount something just because it doesn't seem important to you or doesn't look like you think it should look. I mean, what is diversity but
Diversity is, like I say, when people ask me what's managed services in our industry, right? And I say, it's whatever the customer says it is. And at the time, that's what's happening with diversity. Diversity is not this one thing, right? Or it's only for, I had a lot of people with my council that said, I'm Italian, can I join? I said, yeah, you can join. Are you supporting, a nice mosaic like we have in this room? He's like, sure, I want that. I want to see more women. I'm more comfortable with women anyway. Okay, great, join.
The young man that mentioned about this side, was it Ronald, I think, about the person that spoke another language. When you have if you include more, then they can bring more, and then that makes us better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like you said, you're more comfortable. What if nobody hired a woman, then they'd finally get a good one. It's like, yeah, but I'm not comfortable here because there's no other women here. There's no one else here like me.
Exactly.
So now my gifts are not going to, because I don't feel comfortable here.
Exactly. I'm afraid to show my gifts. I'm afraid to, let everyone know who I truly am. And that's a very big thing. The other part is most of the market, our clients, are now diverse. That's a very big thing. When I sit across the table, like I have a client that was a financial client, big decision maker, and he looked just like me. But when my manager heard him speak, he said he has an accent. It's kind of British. I said, yeah. He says, oh, I didn't think. I said, well, my father's a Jamaican Brit. He's a Jamaican Brit. I said, believe me, it does exist. There's a lot more of that there. And my manager's like, oh, okay.
He didn't think what?
Well, Idris Elba, right? Black British man. It's hard when, you see an African American with that type of accent.
He didn't think that, right, I got you.
He didn't think that really existed.
That happens with me when I travel sometimes. The band is based in LA, so I travel alone a lot because I live in Jersey still. and so I noticed that people will look a certain way because of my hair, and then when I speak, I see their expression like, oh, we didn't think the same thing.
Yeah.
And I can tell they didn't think that I would sound this way, and that doesn't mean that I can't keep it real if I have to. But I know that in certain circles, there's a certain way to get in certain doors. And I know how to do that too. And it's all here. 6 years private school, 6 years of public school. The diversity helped. Yeah. Some people don't know how to play that card because they've never had a chance to have that card in their deck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what's so great about what you said about the way you look, the thing about the AV industry is the way you look, and we've all experienced this in our industry. We have a lot of AV workers that look like you. The dreads, the different, bohemian look. And I guess that's why it works. This industry attracts people who feel the comfort of being different and looking different, right? They feel like there's a place for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially since you don't have to, it's not an industry where you necessarily have to wear a suit and tie all the time. Especially if you are working as a roadie, breaking down equipment and stuff, you can wear the comfortable sweatshirt and jeans, and that's a great thing too. Again, diversified wardrobe. Yeah. Because who even set that standard? Who said that this is what we're supposed to look like?
Yeah, it's true. I came from the IT world. We were suited up every day. Suit, heels, pantyhose, there was a uniform.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
But if someone comes in that doesn't do that, why do we look down on them? If they might have the idea. No. Okay. I was just looking up by definition, diverse says differing from one another. We all are. And it's sad that we have to have the discussion because we all are. Even quote unquote identical twins are still different.
Yeah. Yeah. So based on everything that you know about what we're doing on the council, the AV industry, I mean, what are things, your words of what we should be doing next? Where should we be going? You know, I know that with your band and your group, you give back a lot in education, musical education, going into areas. A lot of outreach is done by you. What should we be doing?
Don't let preconceived notions make decisions for you. Does that make sense? Sometimes what we think is doctrine is not doctrine. It's just what we think, but that doesn't mean it is the way to go. So still remain open. You know, don't say that the short person can't do it. Don't say that the person with glasses can't see it. Don't say that the person that doesn't have a tie on can't go represent you. And even have the discussion with the person and say, we'd like to use this, you have great ideas, could you make this adjustment? Have that real conversation. Yeah, have the real conversation. Another artist I worked with years ago was a female singer, and thank you, Lord, she had the diverse mindset to hire all male background singers. So there were a bunch of female parts on the records. She didn't want any women on the stage. It was just so much easier to just have a dressing room for her and then throw the rest of the band in one other room. Well, how can I do that? Have all guys. And so I didn't think about it till today that was a very diverse kind of move back then to implement that as a background section. So I would say, and I know it's an overused phrase sometimes, but really think outside the box. Don't let society dictate your box. And don't be afraid to insist, like you were saying, insist that your box be seen and heard.
Exactly. When I came into the AV industry 10 years ago, I was at a very big integration company, and we went to our sales kickoff, and one of my workers said, "You must feel bad." I said, "Why?" "Because you're the only one of your kind here." I was the only Black salesperson in a group of 120 plus. And I didn't take note of it because that wasn't my focus. And then I looked around and I said, oh my God, that's true. I am the only one here. And she said, you realize? I said, I just didn't focus on it. I said, and she said, why? I said, because you know what? I'm not making it my focus. I like standing out. That's what I did. So I said, I know, I'm aware, I've always been aware I stand out in a lot of areas, but I like those odds.
And that can be said in the AV industry. Don't be afraid to stand out. Don't say, I'm not gonna do it in this company. Do it in your company. Don't wait for some other company to do it. You be the trailblazer. You hire that person or make that move that goes against the grain per se. And that's one of the things I think that made Earth, Wind & Fire is because Maurice, the band's founder, Maurice White, didn't look at a musical genre. He just looked at music. He grew up in Memphis. He played jazz. Is anybody familiar with Booker T and the MGs? Or the Memphis Sound? Stax Records? So Reese grew up with Booker T. Stax Records had a diverse rhythm section. I didn't know this as a kid. I heard all those records and didn't realize that half the rhythm section was white and half was Black. It was just all soul music to us. So when he put a band together, he just said, I'm just gonna put some musicians together that have a vibe. That's the word he liked to use. It has a vibe. Everything was a vibe. If it has a good vibe, then that's it. So that's a good trait to have also. If the person has a good vibe, if you feel something, get away from what you see in front of you. Just, that vibe might be the thing. Because the thing that I liked about Earth, Wind & Fire is that if the vibe felt good, that's what he went with. And that's why, I think one of the reasons why we're still working, people like the vibe. We didn't try to make music for this one or that table or that table. He just tried to make good music that was positive, that felt good. And so when he did his rock, that's when it felt good. So when you feel that in an interview or something, or in a situation, if you feel that good vibe, go with it.
And it's so true in the AV industry. It's just, don't. A friend of mine once told me, you can do an AV system in 1,000 different ways. Just go what feels with that client, that person you speak to, have the discussion and go with their vibe and their set and vibe with them. And it's the same thing with music.
Yeah, because even if you're, just say if you're wiring a room per se, now you know the things that you've been taught, you know what you've done in the past, but sometimes you get to a certain space and you literally have to make up a different path than what you thought was going to happen for the wiring. So why can't we do that in our hiring? The same thing we do with the wiring, you can do with the hiring.
I agree. Amen. Thank you so much, David. Now, I'm sure there may be one or two questions that someone may have for you. Cindy is fielding it.
Are you offering your iPad to me?
Is there any questions, Cindy? Okay, she's queuing it up.
Are these online questions or something? What about questions from people right here?
They're asking it through this application that BIAMP
So the people here are asking questions to her there.
Yes. Yes. Technology.
That's very technical.
Yes.
I could just come off and give you the mic right here.
Yeah. Yeah, give it the mic.
It's not, okay, it's not working. So,
Well, wait, everybody needs to hear your question.
it's not coming.
That's all right.
Introduce yourself. Cindy Davis, in case you didn't see me earlier. So a lot of the folks from the AV industry actually came from your industry. As Charmaine said, roadies or working in the back. So are you seeing folks in your industry coming from, like, we're trying to get more technical folks. Are you seeing any more folks that are coming from outside, not necessarily musicians? A lot of these folks are actually musicians, which is, so not just roadies. You'll go to one of our trade shows, and there's a lot of, we'll have jam sessions, because there are a lot of musicians, which is interesting. So that's that's a niche. So we're actually trying to get more technical folks in here too, because of the conversion of the technologies. Are you seeing with technology and music, with more non-traditional folks coming into your business? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, you're asking, are there more non-musicians coming in? Because sometimes all the technical people are just musicians that are also technically proficient as well.
Yeah.
Of which I am not. But let's see, on our specific crew.
It's not all short people or all tall people.
On our crew, let me go back to the light.
Boy, you have more energy than I do. I couldn't do that.
On our crew, most of our immediate crew are musicians that are also technically proficient. I mean, our drum tech actually is a very good drummer and has toured as a drummer. He just likes setting up the gear better. He doesn't have to deal with being seen and all of that. Our front of house engineer also was a guitar player back in Oakland years ago. So I've mostly been associated with musicians that are technically proficient. That's my experience. But that's I never thought about that, to get people that just know the technical side.
Starting to become more musical.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll keep my eye out for that.
So I have the mic that I can very happily pass around if anybody else has some questions. Come on, I know you guys have some questions.
No more questions.
What is one thing that you would say any of us can do in our own company right now, tomorrow, to try to make this a better place for all? One thing.
If you want to repeat that.
make this a better place for all.
What is one thing, both for Charmaine and David, what is that one thing that we can do tomorrow? One simple thing, one little thing we can do tomorrow, all in our respective companies, to try to make this a better company, to start something that maybe it's not there yet.
The first word that came to me was listen. Sometimes people have an idea, they have a thought, but they're too shy to say. Like some of you right now might have a question and you don't want to put the mic in your hand and ask it. But maybe go to someone who sometimes is known to be quiet and reserved and just does their work well and then goes back home and comes and does it day in and day out. Just say, hey, do you have any ideas about what we do here, about your position? How can we make it more comfortable for you, or how can we be better as a company? That person might have that idea. So I would say, yeah, listen, or get them to talk and then listen. Yeah, make them feel comfortable talking, because sometimes I'm kind of shy. Well, I am shy, but, and even I just had a meeting recently. It was impromptu, and I'm even rethinking in my head, what could I have said in that meeting with one of my bosses that could help us get better? Because sometimes I have an idea, but it's like, now's not the right time. How will they receive it? So maybe make them feel more comfortable in talking, and then listen.
So kind of start prompting conversation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And stop, many times in our industry, and in work environments in general, it's like, okay, here's the mission. We're dictated. We have to do this. We have to go there. But now we should focus more on prompting the reciprocal.
And even, because sometimes we have the debriefing, the debriefing situation with the higher-ups. Sometimes ask the others, how do you think that went? How do you think that project went? So open the door for conversation. And not even so much come into my office, but go where they are. Just don't say, how things going, how things, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Simple, but effective.
That happened to me at my job, actually. My first year there, I got called into to the hotel room. It's like, yes, how do you think things are going? And I said a couple things. So some were received well, some weren't. And I just had to read the conversation, but at least I was asked. Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent start.
I think one more thing, I don't know, this is still on. I think we should also, one thing that I know that I do, and a lot of my colleagues do, we also need to speak for ourselves.
I'm sorry,
We also need to speak for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So stand up and say something, and if indeed you have that situation that you sit in a room with somebody and you have a lower pay, you get up and you ask for that pay because you are worth it. And I think that if we perceive ourselves as worthy or more worthy, it's a good impression to have, and just speak for yourself.
Because sometimes a person just needs that little push. I mean, that's how. It's funny, I just saw a little documentary on Sonny and Cher recently, and I've known this for years, though, that Cher was more or less shy, and people used to, once they became who they became, people were saying, well, what does she need Sonny for? But if you hear her tell her story, some of you may have heard it, that Sonny was the one that kept prompting. He had the idea, and she had what she had, and he put it all together. He diversified. He didn't say, I'm going to be the songwriter, I'm going to be the singer, I'm going to be this. He's like, okay, I'll do this, you do that. This is a good way that you can do this. We can do this together. We can be, and then now Sonny and Cher everybody knows who they are. Well, most people anyway. But it was that prompting that, sometimes we have to open the door and go to them.
So that's the mission going forward. We got to keep allowing people to open the door and command, and challenge people to give us that say, right? Mm-hmm. To make that conversation happen. So I think you guys gave me a new idea for the next event we're going to have about fostering that feedback, and stay tuned. I think it's going to be very interesting. But any last words you have to say, David? We definitely appreciate your presence here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you so much for having me. I felt like when we first talked on the phone a few months ago, I said, well, what do you want me to come for? I'm I mean, I work on the stage. I don't even know much about the audiovisual equipment. I mean, I call something a different name. It's like, no, not that. It's like, oh, okay, what do I know? But in our conversation, she would ask a question, and I would give an answer, and she'd say, yes, say that. That's fine, say that. And so I said, okay, I'll come and try to. So I hope that I've given you something. And I just think about what came to me when I was listening to the other panelists was how much better would America be if we had practiced diversity from the beginning, how great we could be if we practiced diversity. Because imagine what we could have done if everybody was able to have voice, to have an idea, to have a say. Imagine.
Has to be a habit.
It has
Has to be a habit.
It has to be a habit, right.
Has to be a habit.
Imagine if someone had went to another group of people and said, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? As opposed to saying, nope, we've got all the ideas. This is the only way we'll do it.
And that's a good segue into concluding. We have to make it a habit. We have to make it a practice, a constant part of our discipline, our habit, our routine to practice diversity. It's just like learning a language, right? My grandmother was Cuban, and she came here, and then after a certain while, she didn't speak Spanish enough, and she lost the ability to be fluent in it. And I said, what happened, abuela? She says, because I don't speak it. I speak English all the time. So it's discipline. It's a practice. You have to practice it. So thank you again, David, for being here. Thank you for your words, your vision, your history.
I hope so.
Really appreciate it. And with that, anything else you want to say?
And don't be afraid to adjust. Audiovisual is about adjusting the knobs for the sound, adjusting what do you call that, for the camera lens and all of that. It's always adjustments. Do that in your companies. Do that in your hiring practices. Do that in your relationship. Adjust. Adjust. The white balance, yes.
White balance.
For yeah.
Adjust the white balance.
And make it a habit to adjust.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. And with that said, again, everyone in this room, thank you so much. I know we ran over a little bit, but I hope it was worth your while. I hope you had a good time. We still have the space for a little while longer, so definitely introduce yourselves to each other and stay tuned for the next event we will be having. I don't know when, but if you're on social media, LinkedIn, follow me. If you're on Twitter, follow any of the Diversity Council members. You'll see them. And have a good evening.